In the beginning, it was not the Word, but the imagination. In a silent corner of the human mind, where thoughts merge with eternity, lies a power ignored by the wise, underestimated by the mighty, and yet greater than both: the inner Christ. This is not a historical Christ, nor a distant figure in time. It is the living presence within you, the divine spark that imagines, creates, redeems. In this text, you will delve into the mysteries revealed by Neville Goddard, not as religious dogma, but as living, pulsing, personal truths. Here, miracles are not distant events, but natural consequences of conscious thought. Here, faith is not blind belief, but the certainty that what is imagined is more real than what is seen. Prepare to rediscover the Scriptures as a symbolic map of the soul, to hear the voice of the Master not in temples, but in the fertile silence of your mind. This is an invitation to a sacred journey, an awakening of the soul. Welcome to the Gospel of Imagination, revelations of the inner Christ. For the kingdom of God will not come with warning, because the kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17:20-21. There is no future coming of the Christ. There is no mystical tomorrow when the Savior will descend in heavenly clouds to judge the living and the dead. All of that has been a literal interpretation of a drama that was never external. The Gospel, as I have taught for years in the auditoriums of New York and Los Angeles, is not about the history of the world, but about the history of the soul. Christ is not a man who appeared once in Palestine. Christ is the invisible image of the being you are at the depths of your consciousness, and the coming is the awakening of that image in you. For centuries, the Scriptures have been taken as a historical chronicle, and thus their power has been lost in the dust of libraries. But the Bible is not a historical book. It is a spiritual document, coded with symbols, visions, parables, and metaphors that always point to the simplest and most forgotten truth. What you assume to be true within you becomes flesh on your outside. I have not come to preach a religion. I am neither a priest nor a theologian. I am a witness, and I testify to what I have proven in my personal experience, that human imagination is God itself incarnate in each one of us. It is not a part of God. It is the whole of God contained in each individualized consciousness. You and I are God in the act of assuming itself as man. The drama of the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension are not historical events, but inner movements of consciousness. When it is said, "The kingdom of God is within you," it is declaring the most forgotten key of the human being. Because by seeking God in the heights of the heavens or in the rites of religions, direct access to the throne of the Most High, the I Am, has been lost. The same name that the Lord revealed to Moses in the burning bush, I am that I am. That is the eternal name of God. It does not change, it does not vary. And every time you say I am and add an affirmation, whether poor, rich, sick, healthy, lost, saved, you are unknowingly decreeing an act of divine creation. I have spent my life teaching that everything in the world is a reflection of the inner state. And this book will be the closed map that was never delivered to men, because it could not be written with ink on paper. It was necessary for the reader to be willing to remember, not to learn, not to study, not to repeat, but to remember, because this teaching is not new. It is older than time. It is the voice that whispers in your dreams. It is the knowledge you once had before the flesh, and that now returns to you with the strength of a trumpet. In this book, we will journey together through the mysteries of the soul revealed in the Scriptures as never before. We will strip the Bible of its veil and read not as chroniclers, but as visionaries. Each chapter will be a broken parable reassembled from within, because Jesus, the character of the Gospel, is not a man who lived and died, but the symbol of the man who awakens. Each of the miracles, each of the speeches, each death, and each resurrection happens within the human soul. When he turns water into wine, he is transforming the ordinary enclosed through the act of assumption. When he calms the sea, he is quieting the storms of the mind. When he raises Lazarus, he is showing how a forgotten desire can come back to life if it is assumed once more as true. This gospel that you will read is not for those who believe without thinking, nor for those who reason without feeling. It is for those who have been in the desert of the soul, for those who have tasted the paths of the world and found a void. It is for those who are ready to hear a truth that does not come from me, but rises within you when you recognize that you are the Christ you have been waiting for. Did not Paul say, "Do you not know that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you?" Did not Christ also write, "Christ in you, the hope of glory"? These are not empty metaphors. They are psychological realities that have been buried under centuries of religious ignorance. Religion has taught to worship Christ as an external idol, when the true Christ must be incarnated by each being. And this is not achieved through rites or penances, but through directed imagination, deep feeling, and persistent conviction of being that which one desires to manifest. I have known glory not because it was revealed to me from the heavens, but because I dared to believe that what I imagined was real. I saw myself in places I had never been, and I was carried there. I saw myself surrounded by people I did not yet know, and they manifested. I saw myself free, abundant, healthy, and the world obeyed my inner vision as clay obeys the potter. Because imagination is the only God that molds destiny. And if this is true, and I tell you with all my being that it is, then each one of you is a creator, not by choice but by nature. And as creators, you have been creating unknowingly. Now the purpose of this gospel is to teach you to create with knowledge and with love, to remember who you are, to stop living as a victim of circumstances, and to start living as a child of the Most High. I once said, and I repeat now, man needs nothing outside of himself to create his destiny. Everything he needs is in his consciousness, and if he dares to assume a new state and holds it with feeling, he will see it manifested. This book will be a New Testament, not written to be read but to be incarnated. For only when the Word becomes flesh in you, only then does it become true. This will not be another book on your spiritual bookshelf. It will be the voice that resonates in the silence of your room when you close your eyes. It will be the mirror that does not lie to you. It will be the sword that cuts all illusion and reveals the eternal. You are that which you seek. At the end of this journey, you will not find a new God, a new faith, or a new doctrine. You will find the face that has always been with you, that has always called you in dreams, that has always awaited you in the attitude of I am. And when you look at it, you will know that that face is yours, because in this gospel, no external Savior is preached, but the awakening of the Christ in you. The gospel of imagination begins now. Close your eyes, feel, assume, believe, because everything that is real was once imagined, and everything that will be has already been born in you. The Gospel of Imagination, Revelations of the Inner Christ, by Neville Goddard. I noticed that more than 80% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to keep creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. In the beginning was the felt image, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. John 1:1. In the beginning, before all language, before all words, even before articulated thought, there existed a sensation, an image not captured by the eyes, but birthed by the being itself. It was not form, but it had form. It was not word, but it had message. It was the felt image, the original germ of all creation, the immaterial matrix where the world is conceived before being seen. I have taught that human imagination is God, not a part, not a spark, but the same and absolute being. Yet, there is an even deeper mystery. The image that holds feeling is the first act of creation. Imagination alone is potential, but the image accompanied by emotions becomes the Word, and the Word, as the evangelist said, became flesh. Many repeat that phrase without understanding it. The Word became flesh is not a theological statement. It is a spiritual law. Everything you feel with intensity as true manifests in objective reality. That word is your felt idea, your assumed state, your consciousness dressed with emotion. And once that inner image has been felt as real, the outer world has no choice but to reflect it, just as the moon reflects the sun. There was no creation outside of man. There was no divine act separate from thought. Everything you see, everything you touch, everything you live is the result of a thought felt within you or within the collective consciousness. Because there is nothing outside of consciousness. The universe is mental. And if the universe is mental, then the creating principle was not an explosion of matter, but an emotional conception. When a man deeply feels a scene, even if only in his mind, he has planted the seed. And like every seed, it needs time and care, but inevitably it will sprout. Not because the world is generous, but because the world is the perfect mirror of the inner state. In this mirror, you do not see what you desire, you see what you are. The Word is the soul of the universe, but the soul does not speak in words. It speaks in images. And images are bearers of life when fused with feeling. A house is not built with bricks before it exists in the mind of the architect. A child is not born before being felt by the desire of the mother. Nothing exists in the world if it has not first been felt in spirit. In my deepest nights, when the world slept and I walked between states of consciousness, I understood this truth with overwhelming clarity. Everything I feel as true inside me, regardless of appearances, must appear in the outer world. And if it does not appear, it is not because the world is false, but because I have not felt it with enough faithfulness. I have said many times, assume the feeling of the fulfilled desire. But what does that mean? It is not about visualizing as one watches someone else's movie. It is about feeling that you are the main character of that movie and that the scene has already occurred. It is not about waiting for something to happen, but about knowing that it has already happened within you. That is the felt image. That is the principle. When the Gospel declares that the Word became flesh, it is describing the process of manifestation that occurs at every moment within the human being. You are God becoming flesh continuously in every thought that you feel as true. Every scene lived with emotional conviction is a word that becomes flesh. And if those words were sown with fear, you will see horror. If they were sown with hope, you will see light. The world is nothing other than the flesh of your word. The mystery of life is not in the heavens but in man, and the greatest mystery of all is that man is the unconscious creator of his destiny. He lives desiring things, imagining things, feeling things, without knowing that everything he feels as real is shaping his immediate future. There is no chance, no luck, only the felt image. The soul does not communicate in human language. Its words are silent. They are impressions. And when you close your eyes and assume the role of one who has already received what he desires and you manage to feel it as if it were real, you are speaking the language of God. You are uttering the word you are creating. You don't need belief, you need to make it felt. Don't believe in external things. Believe in the internal power of feeling already changed. If you can assume an image and hold it with joy, gratitude, and certainty, then that image will become flesh. Life, as you know it, is nothing but a succession of images that were once felt with intensity. If you see yourself as poor and feel the anguish of poverty, that image will become flesh. If you see yourself as loved and feel the tenderness of love, that image will become flesh. If you see yourself as enlightened and feel the peace of awakening, that image will become flesh, because the word does not distinguish between the desired and the feared. It only responds to what is felt as true. And here lies the danger and the promise of the teaching, for you are God in action, but God asleep may dream nightmares, and God awake can transform worlds. There is no choice of power, there is only a choice of use. And this book, this sacred writing you are receiving now, has but one purpose: to awaken you to the conscious use of your felt imagination. Never again ask why something happens to you. Ask what you have felt as real within, for that is the cause, it always was. The world does not react to your empty words or scattered desires, but to the emotional intensity with which you have held an image. In the beginning, it was not chaos. In the beginning, it was the word. But that word, that original word, was not spoken with lips, but with consciousness. It was a felt image, an assumed state, a I am held with emotion. And that word lives in you because you are the Word made flesh. You are the Creator Incarnate. You are unknowingly the origin of everything around you. Therefore, begin today to speak in the language of God. Feel, imagine, and assume with conviction, not as one who asks, but as one who creates, not as one who waits, but as one who remembers, because the future has already been created in the mind that imagines it. You just have to assume it and walk toward it as one returning home. The world will not be changed by governments or religions. The world will be changed by felt images in awakened hearts. And you are reading these words because you are already beginning to awaken. This is how this gospel begins, not with a distant promise, but with the eternal revelation. You are the Word, and the Word has become flesh. Chapter 2, the Garden of I Am, and tell them, I Am has sent me to you. Exodus 3:1. Deep within every human being lies a secret garden, not made of earth, nor confined by time. It is an invisible, fertile, eternal land, And there, in that soil, which cannot be seen by the eyes but can be felt by the soul, blooms the seed of everything that will be. That garden is your consciousness, and its holiest name is I Am. When Moses, enveloped in doubt and fear, asked the Most High for his name, the answer was not a celestial title or a sound glorified by religions. It was a declaration, I am that I am. And then, an instruction. Tell them, I Am has sent me to you. In that moment, the most powerful secret ever revealed to man was disclosed. God's name is not something external to be spoken, but an affirmation to be embodied. Every time you say I am, you are invoking the eternal. But what happens in that garden every time you pronounce I am, with an image in your mind and a feeling in your chest? It trembles, because I am is the seed, and what you add to that phrase is the fruit that will sprout in your experience. If you say I am poor, you are planting poverty. If you say I am blessed, you are cultivating blessing. The garden does not judge, it only makes grow what you sow with feeling. The world has taught us to use I am as if it were just a way of speaking. But truly, every affirmation you make with that verb is a command to the universe. It is a decree, a creation. It is as if God himself within you takes form through the words you speak about yourself. Everything that man calls destiny is the result of the flowers and shadows he has cultivated in that invisible garden. But no one can plant for you. No one can care for that land except yourself. And as long as you allow others to dictate what you are, you will continue to harvest fruits you do not recognize as your own. I am is not a magical tool. It is the root of everything you are and experience. If you understand it superficially, you will repeat it without conviction. But if you understand it with your soul, you will begin to guard with zeal what you allow yourself to affirm. Because every time you say I am tired, the body responds. Every time you say I am incapable, the mind is limited. Every time you say I am loved, the whole world conspires to reflect it. The garden of I Am is not in some distant ethereal plane. It is here in your present consciousness, and it does not need years to bear fruit. It only requires persistence in the state of being. Because I Am does not respond to chronological time, it responds to the time of consciousness. A moment of true feeling can produce more transformation than years of prayer without conviction. Did not Jesus say, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed? That seed is your I Am, small in appearance but immense in power, because that I Am is the only part of you that does not change. You can lose your name, your body, your memory, your story, but I Am remains. It is the essence that inhabits all your states, the silent witness to each of your transformations. When Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden, they did not lose a geographic place. They lost the memory of their divine I Am. They were cast into the belief of separation, lack, and fear. But the garden was never destroyed. It was only hidden behind the veil of forgetfulness, and every wrong affirmation, every I cannot, I am not worthy, I do not deserve, has been another stone placed against its entrance. But when you begin to affirm with consciousness, when you say, I am light, I am wisdom, I am peace, not as someone repeating empty phrases, but as one who remembers their origin, the garden opens, the flowers bloom once again. The snakes of fear dissolve in the clarity of your redeemed self-image. Because I Am does not need salvation. It only needs to be recognized. There is no more powerful prayer than this. I am what I desire to be, because in it all distance between you and your longing is erased. You are not asking, you are assuming. And assuming is creating. The soul does not understand please, it only responds to the firm act of identity. When you say I am abundant, feel it until that affirmation is more real than your pending bills. When you say I am healthy, affirm it until your cells hear the song of life. When you say I am loved, let your chest vibrate as if the entire universe is embracing you. And if at any moment the external world seems to contradict your affirmation, do not yield, because the world is only reflecting the previous state. Do not be deceived by time. The flower does not bloom the same day it is planted, but the seed already contains the whole tree, and your affirmation, when held with feeling, already contains the result. This is the mystery of the garden. Everything you are, you have already affirmed before. Everything you will be, you are affirming now. You cannot escape I Am. You can only decide whether to use it to elevate yourself or to sink. And this silent and constant choice is the true free will. You do not need ceremonies. You do not need temples. You do not need intermediaries. The garden is open, and you are the sower. Just watch what you affirm. Just assume with love, because what you plant in your I am will bloom in your life. Do not seek God elsewhere. Say it with reverence, with certainty, with fire. I am, and everything else will be added unto you. Chapter 3. The Fall, the Forgetting of Imagination. Awake, you who sleep, arise from the dead. Ephesians 5:1. The true fall of man was not from a physical garden, nor from a moral height, nor from a state of innocence. It was the fall from the knowledge that his imagination is God. It was the tragic forgetting that everything that exists in his world is a reflection of what he first held as true within himself. Man fell when he stopped creating and started reacting. He fell when he changed the source of his power, I am, for the illusion of an external world that seemed to have a will of its own. Eden was not a place on the map. It was the natural state of the awakened soul that knows it is the creator of its world. The expulsion from Eden did not happen because of eating from a fruit, but because more reality was given to what is visible than to what is conceived in the mind. Original sin was not disobedience. It was the identification with form, with the body, with the environment. It was the moment when man said, "This is real because I can see it," instead of saying, "This is real because I feel it as true within me." From that moment, he began to die, not physically but spiritually. He began to live as a victim of circumstances, as a slave to time, as a product of family history or a nation. He began to worship a distant God when the true God was sleeping in his imagination. And how did the soul fall into such forgetfulness? Through habit, the habit of looking outside, the habit of fearing, the habit of believing in the authority of the world. Day by day, the soul gave up its inner throne, surrendering its scepter of creator, accepting that its destiny depended on others. And so imagination, that eternal fire, began to be buried under the ashes of routine, conformity, and skepticism. But even though asleep, that fire has not been extinguished. I am does not die, it only waits. It waits to be remembered. And every dream that still lives within you, every impulse for something greater, every vision that visits you in silence, is the soul's call to awaken from its fall. For every fall is an opportunity to remember heaven, and that heaven is not up there or out there. It is within you, in the secret chamber of your imagination. I have said many times that the world is not a cause but an effect. But how many live as if it were the opposite? They wake up and say, "Today will be a bad day because it's raining." They look in the mirror and declare, "I have no energy, I can't go on." They look at their bank account and think, "I'll never get out of this." And with every word they accept as reality, they are falling once again. Every affirmation of powerlessness, every acceptance of limitation, every surrender to appearances, is an act of forgetfulness. The forgetting that imagination shapes the substance of the world, the forgetting that feeling is creating, the forgetting that what is seen is not the end but the beginning of what can be transformed. Did not the Master say, "According to your faith, it will be done to you," not according to your efforts, not according to your merits, but according to your faith? And what is faith but the inner certainty that what you imagine is more real than what you see? Awake, you who sleep. There is no greater death than living without remembering who you are. There is no deeper hell than believing you are at the mercy of fate. But there is also no more glorious redemption than looking at your world again and remembering that you were the one who dreamed it, that you were the one who created it, even in your unconsciousness, because every negative state was also a creation. No one suffers without having first assumed, even if unwillingly, that state of being. But here there is no blame, only awareness, because once you know that you created your prison, you can create your freedom. There is no condemnation, only an invisible key that was always in your pocket. That key is your imagination, and it is activated with the simple decision to assume a new state. You do not need to understand how the world will change. You do not need to have evidence. You only need to feel a new reality as if it already exists and remain faithful to it. Yes, the world will mock. The senses will shout. The external voices will say, "It's impossible." But you do not speak to the world. You speak to I am. And I am responds not to appearances, but to fidelity. Fallen one, you who have lived, it was not punishment, it was a call, a reminder, an echo telling you, "Awake, you who sleep." Remember that in the Bible, the prodigal son falls into misery, but not because he was wicked. He falls because he sought outside what was always within, and his return begins when he comes to himself. That is the moment of redemption, not when he is embraced by the Father, but when he remembers himself. The fall, then, is not a mistake. It is part of the journey, for only those who have forgotten can know the joy of remembrance. Only those who have been blind can understand the miracle of vision, and only those who have lived as creatures can savor the return as creators. Now I ask you, how many times have you said, "I can't"? How many times have you believed that you were weak, poor, a victim? Each one of those times, you were sleeping. But no more. For these words do not come from outside, they come from you. They are your soul speaking to you. They are your inner Christ reminding you that you did not fall to be punished, but to remember that you can rise whenever you choose. And when you rise, it will not be with violence. It will not be with struggle. It will be with an image, with a new state, with a silent act in which you close your eyes, breathe and say with power, I am free, I am strong, I am healthy, I am whole, I am the dreamer and the dream, I am the God who forgot and now remembers. And in saying it, the soul rises, and in assuming it, the fall ends. For hell is not a punishment, it is amnesia, and heaven is not a reward, it is the constant remembrance of your creative power. Thus the fall becomes elevation, forgetfulness transforms into awakening, and the man who once lived as a slave to circumstances walks again as a son of the Most High, knowing that every step he takes is within his own dream, and that this dream can be rewritten at any moment by the one who dares to remember. Chapter 4, The Prodigal Son, Journey to the Assumption. And when he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? Luke 3:17. In the parable of the prodigal son, it is not told as a geographic return or a story of moral repentance. What is described there with the precision of spiritual alchemy is the eternal drama of the human soul, the fall into forgetfulness, the identification with misery, and the glorious assumption of the lost throne through the act of remembering. There is no real distance between man and God. There is only a mental state, and that state can be changed. When the son demands his inheritance and departs, he is not fleeing from the Father. He is abandoning the consciousness of unity, the memory of his divine sonship, and as he ventures into a far country, which is none other than the world of appearances and the senses, he begins to waste his substance, not physical substance, but spiritual substance, which is undirected imagination. Every thought without awareness, every desire not assumed, every emotion of lack felt as real, is a coin wasted in that strange land. And there, in that forgetfulness, the famine begins, not because there is scarcity in the Father's house, but because the soul has closed its own channel of abundance. The consciousness that once declared, I am with clarity, now sinks into false declarations such as, I have nothing, I am not worthy, I cannot go on. The hunger the son suffers is the hunger of his own divinity unrecognized. But a moment comes, an eternal instant, where something happens. It is not an external miracle, not the voice of an angel, nor a celestial intervention. It is something much deeper. And when he came to himself, that is the true turning point. The son is not rescued, the son awakens, and that awakening is the living memory of who he has always been, even in the midst of self-imposed poverty. Coming to himself is the supreme mystical act. It is recognizing that the state of scarcity, loneliness, guilt, this is not the natural state, but a condition assumed without awareness. And as with all conditions assumed, it can be abandoned. The assumption is the return. It is not about returning to a place, it is about assuming a new identity. And that identity is none other than the beloved Son who has always been, even when he forgot his name. I have taught, and I stand by it now, that the secret lies in assuming the feeling of fulfilled desire. That is the essence of the parable. The son says, I will arise and go to my father. But even before he arrives, the father has already seen him and runs to him. Why? Because it is not the external father who responds. It is the internal state that activates as soon as the soul rises from false identification. When you assume yourself as new, even though nothing has changed yet in the external world, the invisible universe has already reacted. The state of the Father, abundance, love, acceptance, runs toward you not because you've earned his favor, but because it was always there, waiting for you to sink into it once more. And what is the first thing the Father does? He puts a robe on his Son, a ring on his finger, and sandals on his feet. He does not ask about his mistakes, does not demand a confession, he simply returns his image. The robe is the garment of the fallen state. The ring is the symbol of restored power. The sandals represent the authority to walk in the world without guilt. All of this happens in a single act of recognition, in a single instant of truth. I am the Son. There is no condemnation in this parable. There is only awareness. There is only law. If you assume yourself unworthy, you will live as a servant. If you assume yourself as the Son, the banquet is yours. The Son's mistake was not leaving, but forgetting who he was while he was away. And the redemption was not his physical return, but the internal act of coming to himself. Do you realize what this means? That it doesn't matter how far you've gone, how deep your misery has been, how real your failures seem. At the moment you remember, everything changes. Not through punishment, not through a miracle, but because the external world always responds to the internal state. Always. The assumption is more than a technique, it is a rebirth. When you assume a new state, you are not acting as if it were true. You are claiming what has always been yours. You are saying with authority, I am that I am. And the universe, which has never stopped listening, responds with the abundance of the Father. The banquet is not a reward, it is the natural reflection of the assumed state. The Son does not have to prove his worth. He only has to accept his place. He only has to say within himself, enough of living as a servant. I am the Son. I am loved. I am heir to everything that the Father is. And then the banquet begins. The parable does not mention that the Son explained his mistakes because there is no error that consciousness cannot erase with a new assumption. There is no sin that truth cannot dissolve with a powerful affirmation. You are not your story. You are your state, and that state can change the moment you assume it as real. Just like the prodigal son, you too may be living in a far-off land, the land of doubt, fear, and futile effort. But as soon as you remember, as soon as you say, I will arise, as soon as you assume a new image of yourself, the world will change. Not because it has pity on you, but because you have ceased being the one who suffers. The journey to the assumption does not require distance. It only requires decision. It only requires an instant of inner truth, a sacred moment where imagination becomes once again what it has always been, the Word made flesh. And in that instant you will also say, how many of my Father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? But you will not perish, because now you know, now you remember, now you assume, and in that assumption the eternal banquet of the soul begins. Chapter 5. The Virgin and the Spirit, the Psychological Birth. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son. Isaiah 7:14. In the language of the soul, every closed story is a symbol, and every symbol is a key to awakening. This is the case with the mystery of the Virgin and the birth of the Son. It is not a biological fact, nor a miracle suspended in the history of men. It is an eternal drama continually performed within every human being who dares to conceive a new image of themselves. The Virgin is not a specific woman. She is a state of consciousness. She is the purified mind, untouched by doubt or the voices of the world, ready to receive the seed of the Spirit, which is none other than the I Am in action. When the Scriptures announce that a virgin will conceive, they are not speaking of a physical conception, but of the psychological fertilization that occurs when an idea is accepted in the imagination with pure feeling and inner certainty. Every true birth first occurs in the invisible. The reality you live is the result of internal images conceived with emotion. When you dare to affirm a new identity, when you silently say, I am, followed by something elevated, pure, desired, you are impregnating your consciousness. And like all conceptions, this requires silence, waiting, and faith. The virgin mind is the mind that has not been touched by external reason. It is the mind that, like Mary, dares to say, let it be done to me according to your word, even when the world says it is impossible. It is the consciousness that has been cleansed of old beliefs and is willing to receive the divine seed without questioning it. The Holy Spirit does not descend in the form of a dove, but in the form of a felt image. It does not fertilize a womb of flesh, but the psychic womb of your awakened imagination. Every time you assume yourself as someone new, Every time you see yourself in a scene where you are loved, prosperous, enlightened, and feel it to be true, in that moment you have conceived. And like any gestation, there will be a time of waiting, not because the process is slow, but because the visible world needs to align with the invisible. The image conceived in the Virgin, your consciousness, will begin to grow. At first, nothing may change outside. It may seem that everything remains the same, but inside you, something has been planted. And if you do not doubt it, if you protect it from judgment, if you nourish it with emotion, you will see the birth. That child who will be born will not be of flesh and bone. It will be a new manifested state. It will be the living evidence of your inner transformation. It will be Christ, not as a person, but as the manifestation of the I Am in a visible form. Because Christ is every state in which man recognizes his divinity. And that state does not come by effort, merit, punishment, or reward. It comes by conception. To conceive is to imagine with certainty. It is to feel as real what is not yet seen. Most people do not conceive because they live in mental adultery. They lie with fear, doubt, and the habit of only believing what they see. But the one who becomes virgin, who cleanses their consciousness of such unions, is ready to be fertilized by the Spirit. The angel who visits Mary is not an external figure. It is the internal impulse of divine desire that whispers a new possibility to you. It does not come to impose a burden, but to ask you if you are willing to assume a new state. And when you respond with acceptance, when you say, "Let it be done in me," the miracle begins. The birth is not immediate, but it is certain. Because what has been felt as real, what has been assumed in the silence of the I Am, must manifest. The law cannot fail. The universe is built to faithfully reflect every conception sustained with faith. I have seen men rise from misery, affirming for weeks without ceasing, "I am prosperous." I have seen them transform into health by saying in secret, "I am life." I have seen relationships reborn, hidden talents awakened, and lives turn in new directions, simply because someone dared to conceive in their imagination a new image of themselves. That is the true virgin birth, and it happens every moment, not once in history. It happens when you choose not to be fertilized by the fear of the world, but by the gentle voice of the Spirit, saying, "You are more than you think." And when that child is born, when the manifestation occurs, many will marvel. They will say it was luck, fate, or blessing. But you will know the truth. It was the conscious conception of a new identity. It was the fruit of your imagination in harmony with the Spirit. It was the incarnation of your I Am. Then the world will change, but not because you have changed the world. It will change because you changed the image within you. And as it is within, so it will be without. As in the heaven of the mind, so in the earth of form. And there is no birth without conception. There is no miracle without a felt image. There is no external Christ coming to save you. The Christ must be born within you by the power of your purified imagination. And for that you must be virgin, innocent to judgment, free of prejudices, fertile in faith. Remember, the Virgin and the Spirit are not myths. They are living symbols of the eternal creative process. You are Mary, and you are the Spirit. You are the one who conceives, and you are the one who gives birth, because you are the I Am, and there is no other creator outside of you. So listen to the voice of the angel. Feel the whisper of the new idea, receive it, embrace it, assume it, and say with all the faith of your soul, "Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to your word." And the word, as always, will become flesh. Chapter 6. The Cross and the Submerged State. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Luke 2:27. The cross is not an instrument of torture hanging on the walls of temples. It is not a symbol of pain to be venerated with tears. It is a mystical symbol of the deepest process through which consciousness unites with its creation, the act of fully assuming a new state of being, to the point of forgetting everything that is not that state. When the Master said we must take up our cross to follow him, he was not demanding suffering, but an absolute commitment to the assumed identity. The cross is not external suffering. It is the internal test of abandoning the old self. It is the place where the old state dies and the new begins to live, not because it was granted, but because it was embodied. The crucifixion is, therefore, an invisible ceremony of the soul. It is the moment when man decides to stop identifying with what he has been, his name, his history, his past, his limitations. And he dares to hang that old identity on the cross of imagination to assume a new and divine state. In this sense, the cross is the altar of transformation. You cannot be a disciple of Christ, who is the awakened consciousness of the I Am, without taking up your cross, that is, without assuming a new state with such fidelity that you die to everything else. This is the only death that has spiritual value, the death to the old being. The cross is fixed, it does not sway, it does not doubt. This is how your internal attitude should be when assuming a new state. If you desire abundance, you must assume the state of the prosperous and remain there as a crucified being, fixed, immovable, indifferent to the ridicule of the world. For the world will laugh, the circumstances will mock, the inner voices will tell you that you are lying, that you cannot, that it is not real, and there, nailed to your state, you must say like Christ, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." That Father is not outside, it is your I Am, and that spirit is your conscious attention, which you must entirely devote to the submerged state. The crucifixion occurs when you refuse to abandon your state, even in the face of contradiction. It is when you hold that you are healthy, even though your body trembles. It is when you affirm that you are loved, even though the phone doesn't ring. It is when you see yourself free, even though the bars still surround you. There, in that internal sacrifice, in that hammer of appearances, you are being elevated. Because every state assumed with constancy must resurrect in the physical world. I have said many times that man does not need to be saved, but to awaken. And awakening comes when you understand that everything you desire is already yours, if you dare to take up the cross, to assume the feeling of the fulfilled desire and persevere in it. But few want to be crucified. Many desire the miracle, but not the internal transformation. They want to see without believing, to receive without assuming, and thus they continue wandering from desire to desire without birth, because the Son does not emerge without conception, and he does not resurrect without crucifixion. To crucify yourself is to abandon the I cannot. It is to abandon the I am not worthy. It is to renounce the when and the how. It is to say, I am already that which I desire to be, and remain there until the world declares it too. Christ was not crucified by mistake. He was crucified because he fully assumed his divine identity in a world that was not yet ready to reflect it. And so must the disciple. He must assume the desired state, even when it seems absurd, even when it seems impossible, even when no one understands it. For what the world calls madness, heaven calls faithfulness. And that faithfulness, that unwavering persistence, that internal stillness, is what turns imagination into reality. And what happens after the crucifixion, the resurrection? But it does not occur through pleading. It happens because the assumed state has matured, because you have remained nailed long enough for the old you to die, and the new to be glorified. The cross is then the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the point where desire becomes flesh. It is the consecration of the soul that has decided not to move from its vision, even though everything else says the opposite. There is no redemption without crucifixion. There is no manifestation without assumption. And there is no true assumption without faithfulness. Therefore, take up your cross, not the cross of suffering, but the cross of commitment, the cross of love for what you wish to become, the cross of certainty that does not surrender. And when the world tells you that you are crazy, that you are dreaming, that you are denying reality, answer as Christ did, "My kingdom is not of this world," because you do not create with what you see. You create with what you feel. And if you feel it as real, then it is. The cross is the place where you stop asking and begin to be, where you stop waiting and begin to assume, where you stop existing as a reaction and begin to live as a cause. Thus, every time you assume a new state, remember that you are crucifying yourself. You are telling the universe, "This is who I am," even though you do not yet see it. And if you do not come down from that cross, if you do not return to the old self, if you do not falter, then you will see the stone roll away and the tomb empty. You will see new life emerge, and you will know that it was your faith, not chance, that performed the miracle. For the cross is the beginning of the reign, and the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who dare to die to the old self in order to be reborn as gods. Chapter 7. Faith in Appearances. And he showed him all the kingdoms of the world and said to him, All these things I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Matthew 4:8-9. At the heart of human consciousness, the true adversary is not a horned creature, nor an evil being locked in eternal fires. The true adversary is the world of appearances, when it is given more power than imagination. It is the collective mirage that asserts, "This is real," and demands to be worshipped, with fear, with obedience, with submission. It is not a supernatural being, it is a mental state, the state that arises when man forgets that he is cause and begins to live as effect. That is the true Satan, the eternal tempter, the voice that whispers in the midst of need, "Doubt your power. Believe in what you see. React, don't assume." When Jesus was taken to the desert, as the Gospel recounts, he did not face an external enemy. The desert is not a physical place, but a state of consciousness where the soul is alone with itself. There, in the deepest silence, without distractions, without external help, the true self faces the illusion, and the illusion speaks with cunning. It does not offer darkness, but brilliance. All this I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. This is not a threat. It is a seduction. It does not demand violence. It asks for surrender. It asks that you believe more in what you see than in what you know within yourself. It asks that you give your attention, for there lies the secret. Attention is the constant prayer of the soul. Where you place your attention, you place your faith. And if your attention is fixed on the external world as the ultimate authority, then you have fallen into temptation, not because you have sinned, but because you have forgotten that the world is an effect, not a cause. The then is any affirmation that denies the power of the I am. It is every thought that says, "I cannot, I am not enough, this is too difficult, this is not for me." It is every emotion that springs from fear of the circumstances. It is every reaction that makes you forget that you are the dreamer of the dream. And when you worship appearances, that is, when you take them as definitive, when you give them your emotion, your energy, your identity, you bow before that false god. Then the external world governs your internal state. Then your imagination is imprisoned by the visible. Then conscious creation ceases, and automatic repetition begins. This is why the inner Christ responds to the tempter with eternal words, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only you shall serve." And that Lord is not in the sky, it is in the I am. It is the being that imagines. It is the awakened consciousness that refuses to bow to the world and remains faithful to its vision. I have taught, and I stand by it, that there is nothing more powerful than your own misdirected attention. There is no hotter hell than a life lived from reaction, and no more subtle temptation than believing that what you see is more real than what you feel in your imagination. Worship in appearances is the great heresy of the soul. It is spiritual adultery, whereby man abandons his wife, the creative imagination, to unite with the judgment of the senses. And in that union, fertility is lost, nothing new can be conceived from a womb sold to the world. But you, reader of this gospel, are beginning to remember. You are leaving behind the blindness to the visible. You are learning to see beyond the veil. You are beginning to speak as Christ, to think as Christ, to walk as Christ, because you know yourself as the Creator. And as a Creator, you cannot be a slave to what is created. You cannot serve two masters, the external world and your internal vision. You must choose, and every day, every hour, every moment, that choice presents itself again. Whom will you serve? What you see or what you know? What is or what can be? The evidence or the unseen? You do not need to cast out demons. You only need to withdraw your attention from what you do not wish to perpetuate. Stop looking at failure and see yourself triumphant. Stop talking about illness and feel healthy. Stop repeating lack and affirm abundance, and then you will see how the tempter departs, not because you have defeated him with strength, but because you have deprived him of your faith. He does not die. He simply loses power when you no longer worship him. And worship is not kneeling. It is believing, it is focusing, it is assuming. Therefore, if you want to expel darkness, do not fight it. Light a candle, and that light is the I am in its awakened state, assuming with certainty that which it desires to see manifested. The next time the world shows you all its kingdoms, the kingdoms of fear, urgency, cold logic, and the realism it calls wisdom, look at it with compassion and remember, this is all an illusion. I am the Lord, and him will I serve. For you were not created to bow before appearances. You were created to dominate them. You were created to dream and see your dreams take shape. You were created to imagine and then say, so be it, and the universe will obey. Chapter 8, Miracles, Shadows of the Internal State. Your faith has made you well, Mark 5:34. The world cries out for miracles. Man, immersed in the contradictions of his existence, longs for something outside the law that governs him to break into his life and transform it. He asks for signs, awaits wonders, dreams of divine interventions that will break the rigidity of his reality. But miracles are not ruptures of the natural order. They are the perfect reflection of the internal state assumed with absolute faith. A miracle is not an exception. It is the visible expression of an invisible cause, the consciousness in motion. The man who sees his desire fulfilled has not been touched by a divine whim, nor has he been chosen for a superior favor. He has simply been faithful to an internal image sustained with feeling, clarity, and certainty. When Jesus said, "Your faith has made you well," he was not crediting an empty emotion. He was not referring to hope. He spoke of a deep conviction, a silent knowing that the desired thing was already real. It did not beg, it did not plead, it did not beg for mercy. It simply knew, and in the act of knowing and assuming the unseen as fact, the miracle emerged as an inevitable shadow. Miracles, then, are not caused, they are allowed. They are the echo of a state. Every time you enter a new self-image, every time you feel as true an elevated state, even though nothing in your world reflects it yet, you have given permission for the miraculous to occur. And what is the miraculous? It is that which the world considers impossible, but for the awakened consciousness, it is as natural as breathing. The sleeping man says, "That cannot happen." The awakened man responds, "It has already happened inside me." And then the external world has no choice but to obey. I have seen miracles arise from the lips of those who didn't know how to pray, but knew how to feel a scene with unshakable intensity. I have seen bodies restored, destinies reversed, walls fall, doors open, not by external intervention, but because consciousness moved from one state to another, and the universe responded as a faithful shadow. Isn't that what every page of the Gospel reveals? The Master did not heal with formulas. He did not perform rituals. He simply awakened in the other the memory of what was already there. To the woman with the issue of blood, he did not say, "I have healed you." He said, "Your faith has made you well," because that woman, before touching his garment, had already touched within herself the scene of being healthy. She had already seen herself free, already felt the relief, and that feeling was stronger than 12 years of pain. The miracle was not the healing. The miracle was the faithfulness of her soul to a new image of herself. You too can provoke such shadows. You do not need special talent, spiritual inheritance, masters, or temples. You only need to close your eyes to the world and open them within. Create a scene where you are already that which you wish to be. Breathe it, feel it, inhabit it, and hold it with sweetness and firmness. When you do this, do not look for evidence, do not gaze with anxiety, do not demand signs. Consciousness has already created it. The shadow will come. The world will, sooner or later, adjust to that new vibration you have chosen as your own. It can do nothing else because it is law, and if doubts arise along the way, if the senses scream that everything is still the same, remember that those appearances are not the truth. They are echoes of the old state. Do not fight against them. Simply persist in your new being, and when you least expect it, the miracle will be so common, so simple, that you will hardly be able to remember that it was once impossible. Do not say, "I need a miracle." Say, "I am the miracle," because you are. Every time you change your state, you change your world. Every time you assume with certainty, you transform the law. You do not break the law, you fulfill it in its highest form. And if anyone asks you how it happened, say, like the Master, "Your faith has made you well." Not your deeds, not your suffering, not your waiting. Your faith. That faith which does not look at the surroundings, but knows that what is felt is already real. That faith which walks as if it were already in the desired place. That faith which does not ask for miracles, but provokes them with its presence. For truly, I tell you, every miracle is the shadow of an internal state held with love, nothing more, nothing less, and this is within everyone's reach. Chapter 9. The calm sea, a quieted mind creates reality. Why are you afraid, O you of little faith? Matthew 8:26. The storm is not the wind nor the waves, it is not the roar of the world. The true storm is the agitated mind that has forgotten its power. The tempest arises when the soul, which should rest in its state of surrender, begins to measure the senses and fears that what is desired will not be fulfilled. And only when the inner sea calms does the external world respond in harmony. The gospel account is clear. The disciples, fearful before the roar of the sea, wake Jesus, who sleeps in the boat. Not because he ignores the danger, but because his consciousness is at peace, and peace is the true dominion. When they wake him, he does not join their fear, does not panic, does not ask about the magnitude of the waves. He simply says, "Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?" And with a single word, he calms the sea, and that sea is not outside, that sea is your mind. And that Christ who sleeps in the boat is also you. It is your deep, secure, stable consciousness, which does not need proof to know that what has been assumed will manifest. Fear awakens it, but does not dominate it. It dominates fear, because the calm mind does not need to fight. It creates. I have said many times that imagination creates reality, but that imagination does not act when the mind is agitated. It cannot operate amid the noise. Creation happens in silence, and silence only comes when consciousness has taken its place, when the soul has decided to trust in the law, in the image, in the I am, beyond any appearance. Many pray, but their prayers are desperate cries thrown at a sky that does not answer. Not because the sky does not listen, but because the internal agitation blocks faith. True prayer is not supplication. It is affirmation, it is communion. It is the serene act of saying, "I already am," and remaining there in peace. Even though the storm roars, though the waves rise, though the boat shakes. That is the mind that creates, the one that remains in its vision, even when the world seems to contradict it. The sea calms not because Jesus imposes his will on the ocean, but because his consciousness does not recognize chaos as real, and that is power. The man who masters his world is the man who masters his inner state. He does not react, does not despair, does not rush, does not beg. He knows that what he has assumed already is. In that knowing, his mind becomes like the sea, calm, deep, firm, receptive. When you imagine a desired scene and assume it as real, you must remain there, not just in thought, but in emotion, in attitude, in breath, in silence. If you begin to doubt, if you look at the waves, meaning the external circumstances, and react, you have left your center. You have surrendered your scepter to fear, and the sea will not calm until you do. The secret is in holding the imagined state without emotional interruption. It is not enough to visualize for a minute a day if you spend the other 23 hours negating it with worry. It is not enough to declare affirmations if inside you feel the opposite. The inner sea must be dominated, not by force, but by presence. A presence so intense in the desired state that the old world has no space to exist. That is the sleeping Christ you must awaken, not the one who shouts miracles, but the one who rests in his certainty. He knows that what he imagines is more real than what he sees. He does not need to move to transform the environment. He only needs to deeply know that the Word has already become flesh. And that certainty only arrives in the calm. The quieted mind is the matrix of all creation. When you become still, when you stop fighting, when you give up the need to control and simply feel that you already are, then the world begins to move to reflect your peace. The storm is doubt. The raging sea is the scattered thoughts, the contrary emotions, the broken desires from disbelief. But you are not made to shipwreck, you are made to govern, and your helm is the state you assume, sustained in calm without yielding. Remember, the world does not change because you fight against it. It changes because you change your inner vibration, and that vibration only rises when the soul rests in its vision. Do not fear the waves. Do not listen to the thunder. Do not awaken to fear. Only awaken to the Christ who sleeps within you and say, "I know it already is." And he will rise, not to stir, but to silence, to look at the sea of your mind and say with authority, "Be still, be quiet," and the sea will obey, and the wind will cease. And you will know that peace is not an effect. It is the cause of every miracle, the seed of every transformation. Because the calm mind does not ask, it decrees. It does not doubt, it knows. It does not react, it creates. And when creation is born from that peace, the entire world becomes a reflection of a placid sea. Chapter 10. The Resurrection of the Inner Being. I am the resurrection and the life. John 11:25. Resurrection is not an event that happens at the end of time. It is not a phenomenon reserved for buried bodies, nor a promise suspended in the hands of religion. Resurrection is an act of consciousness, and it happens each time the human being, wrapped in mental slumber, decides to abandon the tomb of the old state to assume a new one. When Jesus declares, "I am the resurrection and the life," he is not referring to his historical figure. He is speaking as the eternal Christ, the principle of consciousness that dwells in all. He does not say, "I bring resurrection," or "I will perform resurrection." He says, "I am." And in that statement vibrates the secret of all awakening. The I am is the source of life. It is the pure being before any form. It is the consciousness without name, without history, without limitation. And when that I am assumes a new state, it resurrects. For every state you have ever lived, power, love, wisdom, abundance, is not dead. It is only asleep, waiting to be remembered. The tomb is not beneath the earth, it is in forgetfulness. It is in the I am not. Every time you say, "I can't," "I don't have," "I am not," you are burying your divinity beneath the weight of judgment. But the moment you reaffirm with faith, "I am," the stone begins to roll away, and what seemed lost, what seemed impossible, begins to emerge. For life cannot be contained where consciousness has been awakened. You do not need someone else to resurrect you. You only need to assume that you are that which you wish to manifest. This is the mystery of the resurrected Christ, that it was not a body that rose, but an identity. The Master died as a man and resurrected as God assumed, and that same fate is reserved for you, not in some distant manner, but in the instant you decide to die to the old self and live in the new. To die is not to disappear. It is to release, to stop carrying the story, the name, the wounds, the doubts. It is to say, "The one I was is dead, now I am this." And to do it not from desire, but from sustained affirmation, from feeling. When Lazarus is called out of the tomb, he does not walk on his own. The voice calls him, and that voice is not external. It is the word, the I am, in action. "Lazarus, come forth." So, you must call yourself not with desperation but with power. Call your sleeping identity. Call the love you were. Call the greatness you forgot. Call the Christ that you are. And in that calling, something stirs in the invisible. It responds because life is not in the years. It is in the state. The human being does not live because they breathe. They live because they assume. And if what they assume is lack, that is what will live. If what they assume is power, that is what will sustain them. Resurrection occurs when the soul decides that its current state no longer represents it and rises. I have seen men and women resurrect themselves in life, people sunk in illness who one day stopped saying, "I am sick," and began to say firmly, "I am health." And by holding it, by assuming it, their bodies responded. I have seen souls broken by loneliness, who one night stopped repeating, "No one loves me," and began to feel loved by life itself. And the world changed, not because the world was convinced, but because the consciousness changed its state. You can do the same, no matter how long your death has been, no matter if the state has been buried for years. The eternal Christ knows no impossibilities. He says, "I am the resurrection." And if you say the same with full conviction, life will return. But you must assume it not as a vague wish, not as a lukewarm hope. You must feel that you already are that which seemed lost. Feel it until your heart beats with that truth, until your body molds itself to that image, until the world has no choice but to reflect what you have decreed. Resurrection is not for those who wait. It is for those who rise. For those who, within the tomb of their circumstances, hear an inner voice that says, "Come forth. This is not you. Rise and walk." And by doing so, life begins anew. The past loses its power. The world no longer has authority. For you have remembered who you are. You have said, "I am the resurrection and the life," and death, any form of death, has retreated. To resurrect is to remember, to return to being, to restore the throne. There is no punishment in your story, only experiences lived from forgetfulness. But now you know. Now you feel. Now you can choose again. And that choice, if assumed with feeling, does not only change your world, it changes your being. From today, do not speak of the past as weight. Do not explain your wounds. Do not repeat your failures. Declare your new identity. Live from it. Walk as it, breathe as it, and you will see that the miracle does not take long, because where the I am is assumed, the Word becomes flesh, and where the Word becomes flesh, life can never be defeated. The tomb is open, the stone has been removed, and you have begun to resurrect. Chapter 11. The Ascension. Come up here and I will show you the things that must take place after this. Revelation 4:1. Ascension is not a journey to the celestial heaven. It's not about bodies rubbing against the sky and souls abandoning the earth. To ascend is to elevate the inner state, to rise in consciousness, to shift the point of identity from the human to the divine, from the limited to the absolute, from the apparent to the eternal. And when the soul ascends, it does not escape the world, it transforms it. Come up here is heard deep within the soul. It is a perpetual invitation, not from an external God, but from the inner being that has been patiently waiting for you to recognize yourself as Him. That voice does not cry out from the heavens, but from the center of the I Am, from the secret place where all creation begins. And as you ascend, as you accept this invitation, things that are to come are shown to you, not because destiny imposes them, but because you have assumed them. Heaven is not a place. It is a state of consciousness. It is the vibrational level where the mind rests in fullness, in certainty, in the vision fulfilled. And you can dwell there today if you choose to elevate your feelings, if you decide to stop vibrating in despair, need and doubt, and place your heart, your sustained emotion, in the already fulfilled image. When Jesus ascends, He does not do it as a final trick in His work. He does it to show that the human spirit can rise above all appearance, all history, and all visible law. His body disappears, not because it has been denied, but because it has been transfigured by a new state. That is the destiny of every being who dares to rise, the transfiguration of the world according to the inner vision. I have said, and will continue to say, the secret lies in feeling, for feeling is the living connection between the imagined state and its manifestation. Imagining without feeling is dreaming without creating. But imagining with feeling, that is to plant heaven itself on earth. When it is said, come up here, you are being asked to elevate your emotion to the level of your desire. You are not asked to wait for signs, nor to negotiate with reality. You are asked to feel as certain what your soul longs for, even though your surroundings scream the opposite. That is true ascension. When the heart inhabits the desired scene before the eyes can see it, ascending is abandoning the habit of judging by what you see, abandoning the sickly pleasure of counting your problems, abandoning the identification with the victim, with the body, with the past, and making a divine decision, being what you have imagined without hesitation. Ascension is not achieved with effort, but with renunciation, not with violence, but with fidelity. Renouncing the old self is rising. Being faithful to the new self, even without evidence, is rising. And each time you do it, a part of the old world dissolves and a new earth is built. Did the prophet not say, I saw a new heaven and a new earth? And this new heaven did not come with fire or catastrophe. It came with vision. It came with the ascension of the soul. It came with the change of state, because when the soul rises, its whole world rises with it. This is the teaching that the world has forgotten. It has sought ascension as an escape, as an evasion of pain. But true ascension does not flee, it transcends. It does not deny the body, it glorifies it. It does not reject the world, it transforms it from the invisible. And you can rise, not tomorrow, not later, now. You can close your eyes, breathe, imagine yourself as you desire to be, and feel it as true. Hold that emotion gently, joyfully, with gratitude. And each time you do this, you will have ascended. And from there, from that new state, you will see what is to come, not because you guessed it, but because you created it. Not because it was promised to you, but because you assumed it. Not because you deserved it, but because you embodied it. Come up here is an eternal call. Not to the clouds, but to the highest center of your being. Not to fantasy, but to power. And when you rise, you see everything differently because you have changed your place within yourself. The earth is no longer an obstacle, it is a reflection. Time is no longer an enemy, it is an instrument. Life is no longer a struggle, it is a mirror. And so every day you can choose where to be, in the cave of the past or on the mount of vision, in complaint or in assumed glory, in repetition or in creation. Rise then. Do not wait for the circumstances to change. Change yourself. Rise yourself. Feel yourself. And then the world, obedient as always, will adjust to the heaven where you already dwell. Chapter 12. Heaven is not far, it is a state. In my Father's house there are many mansions. John 14:2. Religion has painted heaven as a distant place, a dwelling of light separated by years of penance and death. It has taught that only a few chosen ones, after enduring the weight of existence, will be admitted into that kingdom of glory. But heaven is not far, it does not belong to the future. It is not a reward. Heaven is a state of consciousness, and you can inhabit it now. In my Father's house there are many mansions. That house is your consciousness. It is the I Am, the eternal being that does not change but is clothed in infinite forms. The mansions are the states. Each state is a room, a vibrational level, a dimension of existence that you choose to inhabit with your feeling, and the state you assume, that is what you are. There are those who live in states of scarcity, even when surrounded by wealth. There are those who dwell in states of illness, even though their body stands strong. And there are those who have entered heaven without moving from their chair, without changing a single external thing, only carrying their consciousness to the place where all is fulfilled. Heaven is not after death, it is after doubt. It is not found above the clouds, but beyond fear. The kingdom of heaven is in the now, in the exact point where you stop desiring and begin to feel already united with that which you long for. Heaven is the vibration of already. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is among you," he spoke with the clarity of one who knows the law. The kingdom does not come with warning, nor is it built with hands. It is accessed through internal recognition. It is a state, and that state is chosen just as one chooses a door among many. You decide daily in which state to dwell. You do this with your thoughts, yes, but above all, with your sustained feeling. Where your emotion most often resides, that is your dwelling. It doesn't matter if your physical house is poor, if your circumstances scream need. If inside you live in the felt image of fullness, then you live in heaven, and that heaven will begin to manifest in the visible as the faithful shadow of your state. Every state is legitimate because infinite consciousness allows all expressions. But the ignorant man dwells in the lowest mansions and believes he is a victim of them. He lives in the house of fear, in the room of lack, in the dark hallway of complaint, and calls that sub-reality. He does not know he can move. He does not know he can say at any moment, "I am now that which I desire to be." And in that affirmation cross the threshold to a new dwelling in the house of the Father. There is no distance between you and heaven, except the one created by your feeling of separation. You do not need to die to live in fullness. You only need to die to the old state and assume a new one, because the state is the place, and where you dwell with your emotion, that is where you truly are. I have said many times the secret is not in changing the world, but in changing your state. And that change is not intellectual, it is emotional. You can repeat affirmations with no effect if you do not feel them as real, but one single felt affirmation, assumed with certainty, will transport you from dwelling to dwelling. You will not be known by words, but by the change in your experience. Do you want to know if you are in heaven? Observe what you feel as true. Observe how you walk, how you breathe, how you respond to silence. If you are filled with gratitude before receiving, if you rest in certainty, even though the world has not yet reflected it, then you have already entered. For heaven is not a prize, it is the resonance of awakened consciousness. In the house of the Father, your consciousness, there are mansions of joy, freedom, wisdom, and absolute love. But no one can force you to enter. You choose, and your choice is not made with logic, but with surrender. You surrender to the state as the river surrenders to the sea, effortlessly, without doubt, without haste. And how do you sustain that state? With faithfulness, with practice, with intention, not with struggle, but with repeated feeling. You imagine, you feel, you assume, and when doubt wants to invite you to another dwelling, you gently say, "No, I have already chosen where to live." And the world, as the servant of the soul, begins to bring signs without you asking. People, places, opportunities, meetings, everything begins to align with the vibration of heaven you inhabit. And then you know without a doubt that heaven is now, that it is already within you, that you are its entrance. Life is not a test to earn heaven. Life is the constant opportunity to enter it. And you do so every time you decide not to react to the world, but to create from your highest state. Heaven is not far. Heaven does not wait. Heaven is not negotiated. Heaven is assumed. And when you assume it, when you feel it, when you live as if you are already there, you are. Chapter 13, the New Jerusalem, the world reformed by thought. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. Revelation 21, 1. When John writes in his Revelation, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth," he is not describing a future phenomenon or a universal catastrophe followed by a glorious restoration. What he has seen is the mystery that occurs each time a human being assumes a new state with absolute faithfulness. The New Jerusalem does not descend from the outer firmament. It emerges from transformed consciousness. The external world is and always has been a reflection of the inner world. It is not a prison imposed by external powers, but the projection of what the soul has held as true. That is why there is no true reformation of the world that does not begin with the reformation of thought. Changing laws, governments, or conditions without changing the inner state of man is like sweeping the floor without closing the window through which the dust enters. The New Jerusalem is the perfect symbol of a world regenerated by awakened consciousness. It is the visible fruit of sanctified thought, and it does not come with effort, but with vision. It is not built with bricks, but with felt images. It is not conquered with weapons, but with the peace established in I am. Every time a person elevates their self-concept and refuses to return to a former state, they begin to see a new heaven. Their beliefs transfigure, their values purify, and their identity is ignited with the light of the eternal being. And then, without realizing it, the world begins to reflect that new order. Because heaven represents the world of causes, of thought, and earth represents the world of effects, of experience. When you change the heaven within you, the earth around you is renewed. People no longer treat you the same because you no longer treat yourself the same. The opportunities that were once hidden appear, not because they were created in that moment, but because they were always there, waiting for you to elevate to the state in which they could reveal themselves. Human consciousness is the eternal architect, and Jerusalem, the symbol of spiritual perfection manifested in the physical, does not descend to the fallen, it is revealed to the awakened. For only the soul that has reformed its thought can inhabit that city, not because it has earned it, but because it already vibrates at its frequency. I have said before, and I repeat it clearly, do not expect the world to change if you do not change. The world is the echo of your being. It is the veil that projects your dominant state. No matter how corrupt it may seem, how dark or confused, if you within yourself build the Jerusalem of faith, love, and abundance, then you will see a new earth descend. That new earth may be your restored home, your healed body, a transformed relationship, an awakened country, or a new generation. The size of what you desire does not matter. All can be regenerated if it has first been reformed in thought. That is why do not focus so much on changing what you see. Focus on changing what you hold as real. If the world shows you scarcity, do not face it. Assume your abundance. If it shows you conflict, do not condemn it. Assume your peace. If it shows you illness, do not fight it. Assume your fullness. That is the holy battle. That is the cross that transforms. That is the door that leads to the New Jerusalem. John also says, and the sea, a biblical symbol of instability, of chaos, of human emotions, of the formless abyss, has been dissolved, not because the external world has been cleansed, but because the inner world has been calmed. The mind that is no longer stirred by fear, that no longer doubts its divinity, that no longer reacts, is the mind that no longer needs the sea. It has reached the firm land of I am. And the text continues, I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. This bride is you when you unite with the divine state. It is you when you fully surrender to the new being. It is you when you stop visiting the vision and start inhabiting it. The husband is I am. The bride is your soul. The union is the incarnation, and the city is the visible result of that perfect union. A life in order, in fullness, in beauty, in fulfillment. Not because the world has magically changed, but because you are no longer the same. You have resurrected, you have ascended, and now you have descended in glory, bringing with you the city of elevated consciousness. There is no distance between you and the New Jerusalem. There is only one thought that needs to be transfigured. There is only one state that must be assumed. There is only one truth that you must hold as real, even when nothing seems to support it. That faithfulness is the construction. That faithfulness is the light. That faithfulness is the foundation of the new earth. The world will be new, not when the old disappears, but when you stop sustaining it with your belief. The world you see today is the product of the sleeping collective thought, but the world you can bring is the fruit of awakened individual thought. You do not need others to change. All it takes is for you to awaken. And when you awaken, you will see, like John, a new heaven, a new earth, a holy city, a life reflecting the I am that has been recognized, affirmed, loved, and sustained. Chapter 14. The Kingdom in Silence, Imagination Without Words. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. There is a depth in the soul that cannot be reached with words, a height in consciousness where every verb falls silent, where reason fades away, and only the pure presence of I am remains, sustained in absolute silence. There affirmations are not repeated, mental images are not drawn with effort, and miracles are not asked for. There one knows, feels, and simply is. Be still, says the scripture, not out of weakness or resignation, but because in the deepest attitude the kingdom is revealed. Not the kingdom of the world, made of noises and changing forms, but the eternal kingdom of being, where imagination stops speaking and begins to create in its purest form, the feeling without words. This is the highest secret of the creative act. It is not about saying repeatedly, I am rich, I am healthy, I am loved, but about reaching a state where the soul rests in the awareness that it already is. It is a state without language, where nothing is expected, questioned, or forced. It is simply felt as true. True imagination doesn't always need images. There are moments when the most powerful thing you can do is be silent with your desire and feel that it is already fulfilled without naming it, without describing it, without rationalizing it. At this level, the word has become flesh in the secret, without passing through the noise of the mind. I have taught that imagination is God in action, but it is not frenetic action. It is not constant mental activity. The purest imagination is the one that flows effortlessly, that holds itself as a silent vibration in the chest, as a quiet certainty that does not need to prove itself. This is the dwelling place of the kingdom. In this creative silence there is no doubt because there are no questions, there is no fear because there is no reaction, there is no anxiety because there is no waiting, there is only knowing, I am, and with that it is enough because everything else is added. When you enter that state, the world loses its authority. External voices fade away. Time stands still. You are no longer desiring something you don't have, but resting in what already is. You have ceased to be a man searching for God and have become God recognizing yourself. This is the highest point of ascension. It is not shouting affirmations. It is not imagining scenes frantically. It is becoming one with the feeling, with the aroma of the fulfilled desire, without even naming it. It is sinking into that atmosphere until you disappear as a personality, until only the pure, naked vibration remains, without a story. The mind will say that you are doing nothing, that you should visualize, repeat, or move, but the truth whispers to you from within, be still and know that I am God. Not knowing that God exists, not waiting for God to act, but you in that instant nameless are God, and from that consciousness everything is created effortlessly. The walls fall without hands, the doors open without keys, health springs forth without treatment, abundance flows without struggle because you have entered the highest point of creation, the wordless consciousness. This silence is not passivity, it is authority. It is the throne where there is no need to proclaim because everything is already done. There is no struggle to manifest because it has been understood that nothing external can resist a completely assumed internal state. The kingdom in silence is the end of all searching. It is the arrival at the center of being. It is the return to that garden where the word has already been planted, and the trust is so absolute that the soul simply contemplates its fruit with anticipatory gratitude. And how do you arrive at that state? You don't arrive, you remember. You have already been there in dreams, in moments of revelation, in instances when you felt that everything was well without knowing why. That was your soul speaking to you in its original language, silence charged with power. So each day seek that place, not to speak but to inhabit, not to ask but to be. Close your eyes. Feel the fulfilled desire as a perfume surrounding you. Don't name it, don't explain it. Just stay there. And the more often you enter that room without noise, the sooner the world will begin to reflect it. For reality does not respond to your words, it responds to your vibration. And the purest vibration is born in silence. So do not fear the void, do not flee from the quiet. Abandon the need to speak and enter the kingdom in silence. Chapter 15, the second coming, Christ in every man, until Christ be formed in you. Galatians 4:19. The second coming is not the return of a man among the clouds, nor the glorious descent of a historical figure wrapped in light. It is not an apocalyptic event or a cosmic phenomenon. The second coming is the conscious birth of Christ in every human being. It is the moment when the soul, after having drifted through the states of forgetfulness, finally recognizes its divine identity and embraces the I am as its true nature. Christ is not the name of a prophet, nor the story of a martyr. Christ is the inner anointed one, the eternal principle of I am, incarnate in human form. The first coming was symbolic, the appearance of the creative power in flesh. The second is revelation, the awakening of that power in each one until Christ has been formed in you. That is the true work, not to save the world, but to awaken the Christ that sleeps within you, not to wait for signs in the sky, but to see the sign in your heart when you stop saying, I have a problem, and begin saying, I am the solution. There begins the second coming. Christ will not come with the sound of trumpets, nor accompanied by heavenly armies. He will come in silence, in secret, as a whisper that says, You are me. He will come when you stop seeking God outside and recognize that all divinity has been waiting in the intimate chamber of your consciousness. He will come when desire stops being a request and becomes an assumption. Every time a man refuses to keep believing that he is only flesh, history, and memory, and dares to feel his divinity as real, Christ has come. Every time someone imagines the good for themselves and absorbs it without doubt, Christ is born. Every time a mind says, I am, with purity, certainty, and power, the word has become flesh again. I have said before that you are God dreaming that you are a man. The second coming is the awakening of that dream, not at the end of time, but in internal time when the soul is ready. Not everyone will see it at the same moment because not everyone desires to awaken, but the awakening is inevitable. The seed has already been planted. Christ already dwells in you, waiting to be formed. You do not need to deserve it. You do not need to purify yourself. You only need to believe that it already is, not as an act of blind faith, but as a creative act. Imagine how you would feel if you knew without a doubt that you and Christ are one. Dwell in that state. Live from there, love from there, believe from there, and everything else will be added. Humanity fears the end of times, but it does not know that the only necessary end is that of the old self. The end of the fearful, limited, separate man. And that end is glorious because it makes way for the most sublime manifestation, Christ in you. When Paul speaks of forming Christ, he is not referring to religious teachings or dogma. He is referring to shaping the internal state until it matches the divine image. It is the work of the spiritual potter, to polish, elevate, and remember, until what the soul imagines and what it lives become one. And that mold can only take form with one substance, sustained feeling. It is not enough to know the doctrine. It is not enough to repeat truths. Christ is not an idea. It is a state of fullness, of certainty, of absolute love, of silent power, a state that is already yours if you claim it. The second coming is yours. It is your story. It is your destiny. It will not be given to you from the outside. You must give birth to it yourself in every thought, in every choice, in every image you hold as true. Because you are the portal, you are the manger, you are the one who waits and also the awaited. The day when, without fear, you say, I and Christ are one. That day has come and will not come to save you. It will come because you no longer need to be saved. You have remembered that you were the Savior. The world will continue its course. Wars will come and go. Civilizations will rise and fall. But you, who have formed Christ within you, will live in a new world. Not because the world has changed, but because you have been reborn. So walk, breathe, speak as the Christ that you are. Do not lower yourself to explain your faith. Live from it. Do not convince. Embody it, because the world does not need more words. It needs living examples of the divine.